No, Indy isn't here today. Yeah. No, he's out interviewing Brüning about that Hoover thing. No, not the vacuum cleaner, the U.S. president. No, I'm with Sebastian. Yeah, Indy will be back next week. What, you wanted to tell him what? A new tallest building already? Didn't the Chrysler building just take that crown last month? It was last May. Oh, yeah, right. The Empire State Building. 381 meters. That's not just the tallest building, but the tallest structure ever built, isn't it? Yeah, higher than the Eiffel Tower. Ha, I'll be damned. Yeah, they're called skyscrapers for a reason. I wonder how long it'll hold this time. Anyway, I gotta go. Talk to you later.
And this is the headline of the month. 150,000 Stahlhelm members hail Crown Prince Wilhelm in Breslau. Is the monarchy back?
I'm Spartacus Olsson.
I'm Sebastian Brandstetter, standing in for Indy Neidell.
This is the rise of Hitler. Welcome back to the Weimar Wire, covering all of May's malicious, mayhem, maddening mania and mellifluous marvels.
And here is this month's other headline. Austrian banks are failing. The German economy is struggling, and France is not budging an inch.
Now, what does that mean for Germany and the proposed Austro-German customs union?
Before we get to all that, let's have a brief look back at April.
April opened with Walter Stennes marching his Berlin SA men against Hitler, conquering party headquarters for 24 hours until police tossed them out and Hitler expelled the ringleaders.
While the Nazis fought each other, Thuringia's Landtag booted Wilhelm Frick from office, so by month's end, the NSDAP held 0 ministerial seats anywhere.
The communists kept the streets hot, too. Easter Youth Day parades defied prohibitions, prompting mass arrests.
And all this under record joblessness, close to 5 million out of work, and Paris fuming over that new Austro-German customs union idea.
That brings us to where's Hitler? What's Adolf up to this month?
Well, first, Adolf gives an interview to the Daily Express on the 1st. Reporter Sefton Delmer, that's a pretty bad name if you ask me, asks the, as he puts it, fascist leader some pointed questions. For one, he asks whether Hitler is anxious for the friendship of Britain. Hitler replies,
I believe that Germany's interests are similar to those of Great Britain and that we can cooperate alike with Great Britain and with Italy.
Delmer immediately follows up, inquiring what exactly Hitler would demand of Britain. Hitler answers in a convoluted speech. Here are the 2 key points. He wants 1, the cancellation of reparations payments, and 2, a free hand in the East. He further adds,
I do not demand the restoration to Germany of her 1914 frontiers. I do not demand back lost colonies, but I demand that Germany shall no longer be treated as a pariah, but as an equal, and that our surplus millions shall be given a chance to expand into the empty spaces on our eastern frontiers. They must be allowed to exploit the resources now being wasted by Bolshevik mismanagement. It is the only thing that can save Germany and Europe from ruin.
He also inadvertently settles the question of whether the Nazis are fanatics.
I want no softies in my movement. I want fanatics and idealists who are willing to risk all their all for the cause.
Next, Hitler also has some things to say regarding the SA, the Nazi paramilitary organization, still recovering from last month's internal rebellion that Sparty just told you about. The Nazi leader expresses his satisfaction by personally thanking Edmund Heines, the deputy to the SA chief, Ernst Röhm.
As the Chief of Staff, Ernst Röhm, has reported to me, the SA presented themselves with exemplary discipline during the general muster at the Sportpalast. That, despite the upheaval caused by the events of April 1st, the entire SA was able to regroup in such unified spirit by the end of the same month is, above all, dear Highness, to your credit and that of your staff.
And Hitler has even more to say about the SA.
Nearly 200,000 fighters today stand ready in Germany to defend our people and the German state, and their numbers will not diminish. Quite the contrary. 200,000 will become 400,000, then 500,000, then millions, and from those millions will rise the German nation itself.
Okay, enough of Hitler. Let's move on to a movement that already has 500,000 members and our headline of the month. But wait. Before we dive in, we need to address something crucial. Sparty, any guesses?
Nope, no clue.
The Stahlhelm. We never actually talked about them, so today's the day to bring our listeners up to speed. What exactly is the Stahlhelm? What do they stand for? And where do they fit politically?
Really?
Yep.
We never talked about it?
No.
Well, okay, let's dive right in. The Stahlhelm is a Bund der Frontsoldaten, a union of German frontline soldiers from the Great War. Founded in December 1918, it's steadily grown both in numbers and influence. By now, it is one of the largest paramilitary groups in Germany.
Currently, the Stahlhelm is led by former army officers Franz Seldte and Theodor Düsterberg. It emerged as one of the many semi-legal paramilitary groups that appeared after Germany's defeat.
With millions of soldiers suddenly unemployed after the war, groups like the Stahlhelm provided them a new sense of purpose.
Exactly. But these former soldiers didn't remain idle for too long. With unofficial government approval, groups like the Stahlhelm helped stabilize the newly born fragile Weimar Republic by force, mostly against communist uprisings. Since the mid-1920s, they've actually trained young men through youth and splinter groups. Activities, how should I put this, quietly supported by the Reichswehr to circumvent Versailles restrictions.
Now, where do they stand politically? Rather than explain, I'll let them do the talking.
We hate it with all our soul, the current structure of the state. Its form, its content, its creation, and its nature. We hate it because it is dominated by parliamentarianism, because class struggle and party conflict have become ends in themselves, because it blocks our path toward freeing our oppressed fatherland, cleansing the German people from the lie of the war guilt, gaining living space in the East, and making the German people free again.
So the Stahlhelm is against democracy, against the Treaty of Versailles, and for living space in the East. Now, these are some pretty clear parallels to other right-wing movements such as the Nazi Party. And the similarities do not end there. The Stahlhelm is also anti-Semitic, barring former German Jewish soldiers from entry.
We now know what the Stahlhelm hates. So now let's move on to what they want. A state where duty, nationalism, and militarism are the central pillars based on the Frontgemeinschaft.
Think of the Frontgemeinschaft as an ideal from the trenches. Class, creed, party labels vanish. Every man just a camarade fighting for Germany. The Stahlhelm wants to stamp that spirit onto the whole nation by reshaping it into a holistic, sharply hierarchical national community where workers, farmers, soldiers, and professionals keep their separate estates, but all march under one command.
Which means politics without, well, parties. No left-right bickering, just a duty first, discipline first, nation first, order. The individual yields to the common line, quiet heroism, endurance, self-control, and respect for rank are the supreme virtues.
Now, translate that into peacetime and you get their program. A strong, almost feudal state run on military principles. Versailles torn up and the army rebuilt.
Monarchists? Very nearly, though. 3 sons of the former emperor Wilhelm II march as ordinary members, and even ex-king Frederick August III of Saxony turns up at their rallies. The leadership are pure Wilhelmine officers, and the 1871 Kaiserreich is their gold standard. Where the Nazis preach a new order, the Stahlhelm wants Germany reset to that imperial model, just larger, rearmed, and drilled in frontline discipline.
But just to be clear, the Stahlhelm does not officially want a return to monarchy, but many within its ranks, and importantly its leadership, have great sympathy towards that idea. This all overlaps pretty much with the German National People's Party, the DNVP, which is the establishment far-right party in Germany and where the monarchists are usually found.
No wonder, then, that the Stahlhelm maintains very close relations with the DNVP. Anyways, every year on the 31st of May, the Stahlhelm celebrates Stahlhelm Day, just like, well, this month.
But this year, it takes place in Breslau, and not by coincidence. I'll let Vorwärts, the Social Democratic newspaper, explain.
The speech did not lack references to the fact that Breslau was the starting point for Prussia's War of Liberation in 1813, that it was here that King Frederick Wilhelm composed his famous proclamation, "To my people."
So, the Stahlhelm is playing on past Prussian imperial glory in today's political climate. Another fight for liberation is in order, or so they hint. And the guest list of the event is a who's who of the empire's greats, as the Deutsche Reichszeitung reports.
Force equal to 5 army corps assembles in Breslau. The 12th National Frontline Soldiers' Day opened Saturday. The Prussian Crown Prince and his wife stood alongside Colonel General von Seeckt, Field Marshal von Mackensen, and the former King of Saxony.
So, thousands of what appears to be soldiers march right in front of an imperial German field marshal.
Von Mackensen,
His former chief of staff,
von Seeckt,
the King of Saxony, and the imperial crown prince. Sebastian, is it 1911 or 1931? I can't tell.
Me either. And it gets even better, as the Nazis report.
Warm words were exchanged between the leadership of the Stahlhelm and the king.
Of course, the Social Democrats and the Communists are not fans of this basking in past imperial glory. The tearing down of the Hohenzollern Emperor was the primary goal of both movements towards the end of the Great War. The Social Democrats state,
Parade of prince seekers, a nationalist orgy. The Stahlhelm slogan is clear. From reaction to monarchy, from monarchy to a Juncker-led authoritarian state, and from a Juncker-dominated Prussia to another world war. And the communists tout.
Yesterday, the Stahlhelm staged a demonstration of its civil war and mercenary-style units in Breslau. This sends a clear message. A program devised by the very same mercenaries who, from 1918 to 1920, drowned the people's struggle against criminal capitalism in blood.
Finally, it's worth noting that the Stahlhelm, much like the DNVP, is moving ever closer to the Nazis. They've collaborated before, notably in 1929, but whether anything more substantial will emerge remains uncertain. You know what else is funny?
What?
Both the Communists and the Social Democrats tear into the former King of Saxony for the same reason.
Could it have anything to do with his final words before abdicating?
Right on the money. Mind sharing with the audience what he said?
Fine, handle your own shit.
Okay, let's move on to the next headline of today. Economic turmoil surrounding the Austro-German Customs Union project.
On the 8th of this month, the Austrian Kreditanstalt, one of the largest Middle European banks, has bad news for the government. It is a hair from defaulting.
Now, jump ahead to 2 days later when the books for the year 1930 are made public. Well, shit hits the fan. Here it is as Vorwärts describes.
Massive losses in Austria. The Kreditanstalt für Handel und Gewerbe reports losses amounting to 140 million shillings. Given that the bank's share capital is 125 million and its disclosed reserves 50 million shillings, Austrian law would have required the compulsory liquidation of the institution.
The Austrian government has already reacted at this point, injecting 100 million shillings into the bank.
But this does not convince the Austrian people, nor foreign creditors. Next, a fully fledged run on the bank erupts, and with it, also a run on the shilling, the Austrian currency. But why?
Well, in short, a prime merger with the bankrupt Austrian Bodenkreditanstalt, shady cover-up maneuvers involving foreign accounts, and lost income due to the global financial crisis we're living through at the moment.
Some of you might find yourself asking, am I listening to the Vienna Wire by accident? Rest assured, no, you are not. This is still the Weimar Wire.
Although Vienna Wire is also a very good name. Maybe we should think about opening a studio there. There'd be a fixed place for you, you know.
Oh, well.
Doesn't your girl live in Vienna?
Yes, she does. But don't get distracted, Sparty. And she's taken. This is very relevant for Germany. So, okay, the Austrians are taking their shillings and exchanging them for foreign currencies like the British pound. This means that the Austrian National Bank is in deep trouble since its foreign currency reserves are essentially wiped out.
And that means the Austrian banks desperately need foreign banks to place Austrian treasury bonds in their vaults abroad. An Austrian delegation is sent to Berlin, but for the moment, it looks like Germany cannot offer any meaningful help. Austria's neighbor is faced with its own financial trouble.
On the 11th, the same day the Kreditanstalt buckles, Karstadt, one of Germany's largest department store chains, announces that it is in deep water as well. Banks that are owed significant sums of money by the chain are beginning to worry.
But it is not only Karstadt. On the same day, the Deinhard Bank also gets word that its largest client, the northern German wool combing and worsted spinning mill, known as Nordwolle, is not only struggling, but for all intents and purposes dead in the water, with giant loans now hanging by a thread. See what I did there? The fabric of Deinhard Bank, Germany's second largest bank, looks like it might unravel.
You did it again. Stock markets are spinning downwards, with textile, coal, and steel industry suffering the most. In Germany, the sprouting crisis hasn't reached the bank fully just yet, but it's not looking good either. In a cabinet meeting on the 29th, the Reichsminister of Finance, Paul Mollenhauer, paints a sinister picture. The Reich is missing 2.2 billion Reichsmark for 1931.
That's 10% of the entire yearly gross state income, so nothing to be scoffed at. Unemployment figures also remain at an all-time high. Together, this has left the German government little to no room for maneuver.
On the 30th of May, the cabinet meets again, this time to discuss a potential solution, a change to the reparations payments. Ideas are being thrown around.
And two are soon declared the most suited. The first is a moratorium, essentially a pause on the payments owed to France and the United Kingdom, as Ministerial Advisor Berger explains.
That, in the first year, at best 350 million could be excluded from the transfer. An equal amount could also be deferred in the second year.
That makes 700 million saved over 2 years. The other idea is to negotiate the reparations payment scheme altogether.
Oh boy.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
We, us together saw how much political will and fortitude it cost to sell the German people on the Young Plan last year. Heck, half of them aren't convinced to this day, right? But now they want to go the whole 9 yards again.
Well, for now, these are just ideas. But as the Defense Minister Wilhelm Gröner puts it, that given the current overall situation, it is dangerous to delay taking action on reparations for too long. In any case, Brüning wants to discuss the matter with British Prime Minister MacDonald in his upcoming visit to the UK, scheduled on June 5th.
And here, finally, some of you might think, is where the relevance of the Austrian banking crisis for Germany comes to the fore. Other than spillover effects, you understand. So, Germany and Austria want to create a customs union, as we outlined in March.
The French hate that idea. And Aristide Briand, France's Minister of Foreign Affairs, stays online at the League of Nations Europe Commission in Geneva, where that idea is being discussed on the 16th, as the Deutsche Reichszeitung reports.
Briand gave a clear no. As France's representative, he is firmly determined to prevent a customs union planned between Berlin and Vienna.
I don't see how this ties the Austrian banking crisis and the German reparations problem together, though.
Well, in both cases, Austria and Germany are dependent on France.
You mean
yes.
Germany needs France
Yes.
to accept any reparations revamp, and Austria needs French banks to stabilize their currency.
Exactly, right on the money. Confidential sources of the Weimar Wire even say that France is deliberately increasing pressure on the shilling to make Austria yield on the matter.
And France is also flexing its muscles in reparations questions, as illustrated by the New York Times.
In the event that Germany wins a moratorium upon her conditional reparation payments, France would probably have recourse to provisions in her British and American war debt agreements, giving her the right to declare a similar moratorium with regard to these obligations.
In other words, France is saying that if Germany gets a moratorium on its reparations payments, the UK and the US will also have to wait for French repayments of loans. Here the message is also clear. Give up on the customs union with Austria, or France will do everything in her power to prevent any changes to the current reparations scheme.
Okay, enough. Enough of all that. For now, to find out whether the customs union will or will not come to pass, and what happens to the German reparations payments, we will have to simply wait for next month. On to the Global Wire. News from around the world brought to you right across the airwaves.
Starting up. Way up. On 27th of May, Swiss physicist Auguste Piccard and engineer Paul Kipfer lift off from Augsburg in a sealed balloon gondola and soar to 15,781 meters. First humans in the stratosphere. They land on an alpine glacier with pockets full of cosmic ray readings and a brand new altitude record.
Down on Earth, Spain almost ignites a civil war. Between the 10th and the 13th of May, mobs in Madrid, Malaga, and Cadiz torch more than 100 churches and convents. The trigger? Rumors soldiers saluted the royal flag. Fuel for years of rage at a church seen as monarchist landlords. Liberal Premier Manuel Azaña hesitates 36 hours before unleashing the civil guard. At least a dozen died. Spain's brand new republic now fights a culture war as well as an economic one.
Church-state tensions are not just Spanish. On the 14th of May, in Bologna, Italy, Maestro Arturo Toscanini refuses to open his concert with the fascist anthem Giovanezza. Black shirt youth slapped the 64-year-old conductor, forcing him to flee. Within days, Mussolini slaps back, banning Catholic lay groups and seizing Toscanini's passport. Rome and the Vatican are officially at daggers drawn.
Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, America's dry law is anything but. On the 25th of May, the Association Against Prohibition pegs the annual bootleg trade at $2.8 billion, almost the combined turnover of US oil and steel. That's a lot of bathtub gin and a lobbyist's grenade in Washington's repeal of abolition debate.
So, record-breaking altitude, record-breaking arson, a maestro versus a dictator, and bootleggers outselling Standard Oil. The world keeps spinning, sometimes a little too fast.
Especially if you have too much of the bathtub gin. Anyways, onto the Weimar Wire political indicator brought to you by Time Ghost, gauging Germany's current political trends. But you're in luck, because today the indicator will be more accurate than usual, since we have not one, but two elections to base our trends on.
Schaumburg-Lippe and Oldenburg. They give us the freshest pulse on German politics. In both, the NSDAP surges. In Oldenburg, it even grabs top spot with 37.2%, the first time the Nazis had any Landtag. And note the left flank. The KPD also about doubles its votes since 1928.
Meanwhile, the SPD and the Bürgerblock, the centrist bourgeois parties, mostly, tread water or slip a little. Extremist up, mainstream flat or fading.
Well, no wonder. With banks wobbling and jobs vanishing, what's been true since we started this series in January 1930 still holds in May 1931. Polarization to the extremes. And that wraps up the indicator. So big questions as the calendar flips to June. Will Austria's banking fever drag Berlin's banks down with it, or can Brüning clinch real help in London?
If France keeps blocking the customs union, does Vienna give up? Or does Berlin double down and risk a showdown?
Oldenburg just crowned the Nazis. Which Landtag is next? And can the battered center halt the slide?
with 150,000 steel helmets on parade. Is the Stahlhelm marching into an alliance with Hitler or into a monarchist dead end?
We'll chase every lead next month. Huge thanks to Timeghost Army for keeping these wires humming. Want to join the mission? Head over to timeghost.tv or patreon.com to enlist. Weimar Wire, signing off. Excelsior!